Okay, don't start my time yet, but this really crazy thing happened. My friend Ariel told a story about Saul Williams, and then some dude came over, and he was like, yo, what's up? And I was like, yo, what's up? I got really defensive on behalf of her because she has his boyfriend, and he was sitting there and was like, hey, I just got this text message, and I was like, what the fuck? And it was from Saul Williams, and he was like, thanks for the shout-out, Ariel. I thought that was kind of cool. She was the first girl who told the story. Okay, so... No, Saul Williams isn't here. The dude with the white shirt in the back raising a beer is friends with Saul Williams and came over. The person she told the story about. Come on, guys. The dude, when she was like, oh, Saul Williams. Okay, fair enough. I'm late to everything. Okay, so when I first moved to Philadelphia, I got this like dream job in the bartending industry, which is kind of a misnomer. And I worked at North Bowl. Does anyone know where North Bowl is? There you go. It's a swanky bowling alley on 2nd Street. So I got this sort of accidental job, like they were just advertising on Craigslist, and I walked in, and then I later found out that it was kind of a big deal. And so I was working my way at the time. I was working for free as a development agent. Wink, wink. First person arts. And I was working for free at this place that I really loved in North Philly, and then bartending at night to actually pay the bills. And when you're a bartender, you're kind of always almost famous, because inevitably when you're not working, somebody's going to walk in and be like, oh, hey, can I get 2 yards? Like, I'm friends with Lansie. And the bartender's going to be like, awesome. And then, like, when I wasn't working, somebody would walk in and be like, hey, can I get a gin and tonic? Like, I'm friends with Heather. I'm like, awesome. Because every bartender has, like, 6,000 friends. Because when you're out, you're like, oh, my God, you should totally come to my bar. I work on Thursdays. Like, I'll totally buy you a drink. And they come on like a Tuesday and you're not there, and then they just try to like scam free drinks because you're not there. So I was working at this bar at North Bowl, and so the running joke among all my friends and I were the fact that Tony Danza had moved to Northern Liberties, and we were kind of like doing this like, oh, Tony Danza impression to each other. And so like I would be like making drinks, and like the waitresses would come over, and she'd be like our whole running joke was that Tony Danza was really, really nice and had a futon, and also was really hospitable. And so if you got too drunk, you'd be like, oh, no, Lansie, it's fine. Like, you can sleep on my futon. Like, you want a bagel bite, you know? This is just kind of like the running joke. And so my friend Victoria, who's waitressing, comes up and she's like, oh, hey, do you want a bagel bite? And I'm like, oh, you can sleep on my futon, you know? And then the other waitress comes up and she's like, Tony Danza's at your bar. And I was like, oh, yeah, you can sleep on my futon. And she's like, no, seriously, like, upper right corner. And Tony Danza's at my fucking bar. So I'm really excited about this, right? But I'm trying to play it cool. And I have my co-bartender who's like this big kind of Philly guy, because they put like this big Philly dude with like this little like cute waitress. So like I would cater to the dudes and he would cater to the chicks, and we made more money. It was great. So he goes up and he like asks Tony what he wants, and Tony's like, I'm fine. So I walk up and I'm like, hey, can I get you something, da-da-da-da-da? And he's like, oh, I'll have a burger, da-da-da-da, and a double kettle on the rocks. I'm like, you got it. Tone, you know, like, I don't know, am I supposed to know who he is? So, you know, I go back and I get him the drink and I come over and he was like, what's your name? I was like, Lansie. He's like, Nancy? And I'm like, no, Lansie, you know, like with an L. And he's like, oh man, my name's Tony, with a T. Sticks out his hand. I'm like, well, it's nice to meet you, Tony, with a T. And so he's talking and, you know, like we're just like chatting. Nice, he's really nice guy, really, really good tipper, I might say. Phenomenal. I mean, like 120%. I calculated it. And so the whole thing is like Tony Danza's like shooting this story in Northern Philly where he like goes to be a teacher, and the show is called Teach. I don't know if anybody's seen it. All right, so you might have seen my forearm at one point. So he's shooting this thing called Teach, right? And I did AmeriCorps in Providence, right? So at one point, Tony Danza's there, and like there's always all these cameras. It's a total pain in the ass. We lose like half our bar, but like luckily, you know, you're kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like I'm almost famous. Like this makes up for the fact that I'm not making money in tips. So everybody kind of knows, you know, like Tony Danza's, you know, and I become like almost famous in my circle of friends because everybody likes to talk about how Tony Danza's one of my regulars. Untrue. I think I waited on him like twice. But the second time, right, so there's all these really big events at North Bowl. It's this huge bowling alley. And I get slated to be the bartender for the wrap party for Teach. Right? And I don't know this because on the little schedule sheet, right, you go to the side and you're like, all right, we're going on Friday and Tuesday. It just says like North Philly Teachers Association. I'm like, oh, sweet, you know, like it's a bunch of Cosmos. I hate making Cosmos. and so, so like I get there, right, and there's all these people, and they're tiny people. They're like 13-year-old people. And I'm like, oh man, these are students. And I'm like, oh man, these are teachers. I'm like, oh man, this is teach. This is awesome. So like everybody walks in and I'm like, this is my day, you know, like finally. I'm totally gonna have Tony dance as like a regular, you know, like he's gonna know me, we're gonna hang out. So Tony comes up and he's like, hey, you. And I'm like, hey, Tony with a D, you know. And he proceeds to get smashed. Like I got Tony dance just totally hammered. Like you want to talk like double, there's like triple kettle in a rock. Like you can see like when she pours, it'd be like a 9 count. You know, it's like a whole like pint glass of kettle. So the whole thing like kind of goes off without a hitch. They're just racking up this bar tab. And like the whole night I'm kind of feeling kind of cool, you know, because like Tony comes up and he's like, hey, let me get a, and I'm like, double kettle on the rocks, and he's like, yeah. I'm like, I totally know this order. So at the end of the night, right, it's like not a hard order either. So like, oh, can I get it, you know, like, just like double kettle on the rocks. I'm like, I'll just pour you a pint glass, you'll be fine. And so at the end of the night, this like, you know, like, I don't know what you would call them in cinema, like lackey, you know, like this like nervous person comes up to me, and he's like, and he comes up and he's like, hey, I'm like, hey, and he's like, what's your name? I'm like, Lansie. With an L, you know, and he's like, okay, great. He's like, because Tony's gonna come up and he wants to give you a heartfelt goodbye, and he couldn't remember your name. Wait. Just wait. So I'm like, oh, okay. I can understand that. You know, guys fucking hammered. I mean, just waste it. So he comes up at the end of the night, and he's like, hey, Lansie! And I'm like, Tony! And, you know, pretending that I'm not hurt. And he comes up, and and so he goes to give me a hug, right? And I'm like waiting for the hug, and instead he kind of does this thing, right? To give me a handshake. I'm like, all right, sweet. You know, we're gonna have this, camera's rolling. You know, like we're gonna have this handshake. And he palms me a 20. He's like, you did such a good job! And I'm like, you are totally smashed. And that's when I realized that just because a celebrity comes to your bar a couple times does not make him your regular. It just makes him a celebrity that comes to your bar a couple times.